Okay, JC, your show.
Thank you very much, Bob. Good morning, everybody. My name is JC Gordon, and I live in Vancouver, Canada. My near-death experience happened on June 25th, 1996. Prior to that, I had been as left-brained as one possibly could be. I thought that life was all about making as much money as possible. I was a banker. I was successful in the banking industry. I had rose to the top, close to the top of the banking industry as what one could get to. And it sickened me because all I found around me were, sorry to say this, but were snakes. And I realized that I didn't want to be anymore be a part of that. And it was in 1994 that I semi-retired and I got out of that industry. I sold my businesses and I moved to the most remotest part of my province of British Columbia that I knew at that time. It was a small remote community called Bella Coola, which is about 400 miles north of Vancouver. There's about 3,000 people that lived in Bella Coola. Half of them were Native Indians. And I built my own log house, put in my own power system. And on June 25th, 1996, I was bucking some wood when the chainsaw kicked back and went through my throat. And at that precise moment, I internally heard a voice. And that voice said, "Everything's going to be okay. I have a purpose for your life." And for me at that moment in time, I never felt anything. Adrenaline kicked in. I never felt anything. But from that moment in time, everything just completely slowed down. And I knew that I was going to be fine. 45 minutes later, I was delivered to the emergency room. I was on the emergency room table. Doctor was standing about 18 inches away from, or maybe 3 feet away from me. The nurse on the other side. Then all of a sudden, I'm not looking at them this way. I'm on top of the room. And I'm looking down at the backs of their head. I'm looking down at myself. And it was from that moment that I went into total blackness. It was almost like a rickety elevator. And I remember looking up and seeing this, it was like the first star. You know, like the first star you see at night, it's really, really small. Well, that's what I saw. And I continued to watch that. And it just got brighter. It just grew and grew and grew until it was an all-encompassing white light that I literally just went through. And where I landed was on top of a mountain. There was no other life there. But the instant that I was on top of the mountain, I just knew that I was home. I knew that where I was where I was supposed to be. And very shortly after that, I felt like a little nudge on my elbow like this. I didn't have any body, but I felt that. And it just led me down the mountainside, and I wasn't walking, I was just kind of floating across the grass. And about 1 o'clock, I noticed that there was this castle-like structure. It was round, it had this fence around it, and as I got close to the fence, the gates just opened. I went through it. I went through the main doors of the structure, went to the right, up the stairs, along the top floor, and there was a room on the right. And I remember it looked like a library. It was big. It was oval. They weren't books, but it was almost like CD sleeves that were there. And I went past that. There was a room on the left. There were 4 entities sitting in there. They were sitting in a circle, cross-legged. They had hoodies on. They didn't look at me, and I just went past that. Then I went into the next room on the right, and I sensed the door close behind me. Complete blackness. And all of a sudden, I started to feel a presence. I started to feel a warmth that came. And lights, little 6 lights formed a hexagon. And out of that hexagon, it was like violet lightning that connected it all. And in the middle, it was a circle formed. And it was, remember a long time ago, I'm showing my age here, but when TV stations would go off at night and you had like that snow on the TV screen, well, that's what this was. And it started communicating with me. It was all energy. It started communicating with me. And I call them in my book, zings, violet lightly zings, that would hit me between my eyes, although I had no eyes. But every time I got one of those communications, I knew what it meant. Where I ended up was I was literally communicating directly with the source of all consciousness. And the source of all consciousness asked me to come into that round structure. The source is asexual. It is both male and female. The male outside was the mind, the consciousness of source. The inside was the womb. And it took me within its womb, and it delivered me. I felt like I was back in a high school lab, my chemistry class. And where it took me was to the events, to the place where everything happened before time began. And it showed me life from its perspective at this time. I was like a fly on the back of the wall. And it zinged me and said, I'm going to morph into a form that you can understand. And it did. And it then, with its two hands, turned around and just energetically created its matrix for life. And it was from this matrix that everything came from to create everything that is its life. And what it did, there were 10 seals on this matrix, and it unleashed the seals from the 10th seal and the first 4 seals. The first 4 seals began life. The 10th seal was the end of life. It also showed me everything that is to happen and will happen after time as we know it stops. Because what the source of consciousness is the totality of simultaneous time. Time as we know it is a past, present, and future. But it's only a small component of the totality of what the source of consciousness is. And it showed me that a way to illustrate what time was, I kind of use as an example when I'm speaking. I say, think of time as the Empire State Building, or a very, very tall structure. Everything that happened before time was that foundation of that structure. Our understanding of time now is like we're walking on that ground floor, and we are to move into the end of time. And that's what I was showing. And when that was done, I went out the womb, and I was back in that room where I first landed. And I was told, it's now time for you to go back. I have a purpose for your life. I said, no, I'm not going back. I've written 14 books on this journey that I had. And one of the books that I wrote, I interviewed about 100 people who had near-death experiences. And we all had one common denominator with us all, and that was none of us wanted to come back. But I was trying to negotiate with God. I'm saying, no, I'm not coming back. Yes, you have to go back. And the final time after it said you have to go back, and I said, no, it left the room. The energy just literally left the room. And I turned around and I went back, and I had the opposite journey. I went out of the structure, up the mountain, and I saw at the top of the mountain a rabbit hole. And I knew I had to go down it. So when I went down it, I was now moving through the cosmos of time in the reverse direction that I came, and all of a sudden I'm in the emergency room again. There were a few more people in the emergency room now, and I just slowly went down beside my body, into my body, opened up my eyes. The physician's there. He was a locum, a retired locum. He was the only one that had the ability to stitch me up. And he was so cool. So he just looks at me, and he says, oh, it's okay, he's back. And then I got wheeled in. Anyways, I had the surgery, got wheeled into the room. But I knew that the profundity of what it was that I was revealed, that was my purpose to come back, to let people know what it was. And for a week after I came back, I couldn't sleep because I was just vibrating with excitement. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all this? And I remember going to the first 2 friends, or I had a couple friends that I went to, And I told them what had happened to me. And I could tell by the way they were looking at me, they thought I had lost it, right? It was like, what is this guy talking about? But they were nice, and they asked me some questions. And they were really, really great questions about my experience. And I couldn't answer them. I didn't know how to answer them. And what that did to me is it seared me. It just, because I knew the profundity of what I had was needed to be known. I had always been a truth seeker in my life and a fact lover. I had the truth, but I didn't have the facts. And I knew that I had to discover those facts. Well, that was in 1996. And I have literally been on a 21-year journey looking at every aspect of science, of religion, of philosophy, of spirituality. And they all had pearls of wisdom that acted as dots that connected the dots to lead me to understand the facts so that I can explain them in a way that our consciousness can understand. As a result of what I do now, I'm a consciousness empowerment coach. And what I do is I take people on that journey to meet Source, the infinite mind, and download the infinite mind into us. Because what I learned was that it's not us that needs God. It's God that needs us. And I saw the end. And what the end is, what the great thought is all about, is Source is creating his body. And what his body is every moment of unconditional love that ever was. It exists. It's alive right now in the end. And where we are at from a perspective of time is those seals on the matrix, what are called forward velocity, are meeting the reverse velocity. We are at that point in time right now. I call it the era of synchronicity, where the convergence point of time, where forward moving velocity meets reverse velocity. Now, I'm sure many of you know what reverse velocity is, but for those of you who don't, reverse velocity is this. Let's say you're holding a wine glass and you drop it. It shatters. Reverse velocity takes that shattered glass and makes it whole. And that's where we are at right now. We are moving out of reverse velocity to make every moment of our unconditional life be part of who we are forever and ever. And life is not just in this universe. There are 100 trillion other universes similar to ours that make up the whole of what the infinite body is. And every person on this planet, 7.5 billion of us, have all experienced a moment of unconditional love with each other in another universe. Every one of those moments will come alive again, and they're already existing. And there's only one thing that we have to do right now, and that's make the choice that we want to be part of it. And it will happen, because it's there. The beauty of what I saw of Source's unconditional love is this, is he has left it to every single one of us to choose it. It's our free will to decide if we want it. It's there, it's waiting. It took me 21 years to be able to succinctly get on this stage and explain it. This is my coming out party. This is the first time that I am coming out with this. And thank you. And back in 1996, when I had this experience in Vancouver, I had no one to talk to about it. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And I am forever grateful to IONS because in 1998 they were in Vancouver and on the UBC campus, and I attended that. And at that point in time, my journey was significantly waning. I knew what it was, but I had no idea what to do with it. I had no idea where to go with it. And it was PM Atwater's talk that saved my life. And I had the fortune yesterday to meet her for the very first time and thank her. Because during my 21-year journey, I call it my post-NDE journey, it was very important for me to not get involved or know anything on a horizontal basis that was happening, because my relationship, my training ground was this, vertically. And I want to thank everybody for being here and listening to me, and thank you for your time.
Wow. Kind of interesting. I'm psyched.